Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making some easy melt-in-your-mouth peanut butter cookies. So let's get started. First off, preheat your oven to 350 because this recipe comes together in just a few minutes. Now, in a medium bowl, you want to combine your dry ingredients, starting with 1.5 cups or 180 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm using a scale because that's going to give me the best results. These cookies can't go wrong unless you use too much flour. That's the main thing. So a scale's really your best friend here. If you're using a measuring cup, just fluff your flour, sprinkle it in, and level it off. That way you don't scoop up too much flour. To puff these cookies up, I want 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder. So 1/4 My scale's done for the moment. I'm setting that aside. And I just want to say, if you noticed any lumps in your flour, that's not optimal. So you might just want to sift things out. My flour is pre-sifted, so I skipped that step. Grab a whisk. And we're just gonna whisk this together so it's nice and combined. Peanut butter cookies are a favorite in my household. I love them because they are so perfectly salty and sweet with this wonderful buttery texture. They just melt in your mouth. They're very delicate. And yet, it's like one of the easiest recipes to make, and I always have the ingredients on hand. Flour, salt, baking powder, peanut butter, a little bit of vanilla, and butter, and sugar. Set your flour aside, and now we're gonna grab our mixer. Into the bowl of your stand mixer or a large bowl if you're using a hand mixer, we're gonna add 1/2 cup or 113 grams of room temperature unsalted butter. And I just wanna point out, your butter should be nice and soft. You can press in with your finger, you can bend it, it's not at all stiff. Okay, plop that in, but I will say it's not melted either, it's soft. Room temperature doesn't actually mean the ambient temperature that you're working in, because a lot of times, one, your countertop is freezing cold, so it'll suck all the heat out of your butter. It could be a really, really hot day and your butter would melt at room temperature. It needs to be this like soft but still solid stage. To sweeten things up, I want 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 100 grams, and 1/2 cup of packed light brown sugar. That's about 110 grams. And if you're wondering why I don't just use all brown sugar, since brown sugar is so delicious, it's because brown sugar will cause your cookies to spread a bit more. So we want to have a little bit of control over the spread, which means we're using a 50-50 combination. I was like, is that a penny in my brown sugar? It's a brown sugar bear. It keeps your sugar soft. I just want to show you this because I got this as a gift for my book tour. This lovely lady asked me if I had one, and I said no, and she took this out so I could use it in my kitchen, which I have been, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Pop your paddle attachment on, and we're gonna cream this up until it's nice and combined. I highly recommend that you taste your peanut butter first. So good. Some peanut butters have very little salt. Some are fairly salted. This is fairly salted, so I'm just gonna add an extra pinch of salt or so. If you like your cookies extra salty, you could add up to a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Everything's nice and combined, so now it's time to add the star, our peanut butter. 1 cup or 250 grams of peanut butter will give you lovely flavor and the most amazing consistency. It is so short, or melt in your mouth, like shortbread. By the way, if you like my videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's 2 new recipes every single week. Now we're gonna mix this until it's incorporated. And if you're wondering, where did these cookies come from? Have they always existed? No, they're actually fairly recent because peanuts weren't a thing a long time ago. George Washington Carver had to convince people to eat them. They're like, oh, what are these beans that grow in the ground? Nobody wants that. He made a whole cookbook of delicious recipes, including peanut butter cookies, and the recipe came out in 1916. And if you noticed earlier, the peanut butter I was using was like a totally processed peanut butter. It mounds up, has a lovely silky texture. That's gonna be like your normal like Jif, Skippy, etc. If you wanna use like Nature's whatever, or like the freshly ground peanut butter, you can do that, but I would not recommend it just because processed peanut butter has salt and sugar and an oil to act as an emulsifier so it stays together. That's why it's so delicious. You eat it by the spoonful. So I would add about 2 tablespoons of additional sugar if you're using that, and I would give it the best mix ever because it tends to separate and can be really hard and compacted on the bottom and very oily on top. If you want to use a crunchy peanut butter, that is totally fine, and I love your choices. Definitely time to scrape the bowl down. You want a nice homogeneous mixture with no pockets of butter on the bottom. I also imagine the butter on the bottom is a stowaway trying to get a free ride. Not on my shift. This is not a peanut butter shortbread cookie. It has an egg to act as a binder and hold everything together. So, 1 egg, and I'm gonna crack this into a small bowl to make sure there is no shell. That's a best practice. Now this goes into your mixer, along with a teaspoon of vanilla to give you a lovely depth of flavor. Mix this up until it's nice and combined one more time. And now we can add our flour mixture. Not a drop on the counter. The only other thing that could possibly give you something other than the best peanut butter cookie ever is overmixing your batter. So on low, mix the batter until it's just about combined, and then grab your spatula and finish it off by hand. You really only need about 10 seconds of mixing. Scrape your bowl down, just to make sure there's no flour pockets hidden here or there. And now we're ready to scoop, press, and bake. Line your rimmed baking sheets with some parchment paper, and we're gonna scoop up about 2 tablespoon-sized pieces. This is just about 40 grams, if you're measuring it out. Give it a quick roll, pop it onto your baking sheet, and continue the process. These, of course, are classic, just plain delicious peanut butter cookies. But you can really make this recipe your own by adding anything you'd like into the recipe. You could have chopped chocolate, M&Ms, nuts. You could even grab a piece of chocolate, plop it into your peanut butter cookie, and then just press around for a stuffed cookie. When these cookies bake up, they're not gonna change shape. Like if this was a chocolate chip cookie, it would smooth and spread and bake evenly, but the peanut butter will freeze this in place. They're gonna remain kind of like balls. So they're gonna bake unevenly unless we press it down. And part of pressing that down is using your fork to make that crosshatch pattern. All that does is give you a nice even bake so your cookies aren't raw in the middle. You can thank the Schenectady Gazette for making that happen in 1932. Before that, peanut butter cookies didn't have that pattern. Grab a fork and just press and press. Press and press. This is a really fun thing for kids to help with, so if you have any around, bring them in and let them help. You can also use your palms to give them a little pre-flattening, and then use your fork, which will give you less of a cracked cookie. Your peanut butter cookies will last for up to a week in an airtight container, or you could freeze the cookie dough after it's been rolled and pressed with the fork. Just freeze flat on a baking sheet and then transfer to a freezer bag. You can bake from frozen, but you'll have to add a couple extra minutes of bake time. I'm gonna make my cookies in batches. The first is ready to go in 350 for about 10 minutes. They bake so quickly. And then we'll do the next batch while these cool and I eat them all. In you go. Out of the oven, smelling amazing and ready to enjoy. That is the perfect peanut butter cookie. Melts in your mouth, full of flavor, and it's perfectly sweet. I hope you get a chance to make this recipe, and if you like my videos, hit that subscribe button and check out my cookie playlist.